Okay, welcome everybody. Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, chapter 44. So we're in the middle of 11, but we'll go back to 10 just very quickly, at least outside, and just okay. So we're speaking about benching. The Birchas Hamazon, the I don't like to say the grace after meals. It sounds like a Christian way to say it, but the Torah blessings that we say, the blessing we say after a meal. So we have we mentioned in number 10, so those just joined us, chapter 44. We mentioned that on Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh, we have an addition. We say Retiree and for Shabbos and Yalav V'Yavoy for Rosh Chodesh or Yontif. And we said that when we have both, so it's Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh or Shabbos and Yontif, Retiree comes first because it's more common. Todesh and Todesh Koidem is a rule we have that when you have two things, one is more frequent relative to the other, and otherwise they're equal. So the more frequent one comes first. So that was the last one we finished, and then we started the next one. We said, but let's say a person. Well, we'll speak about what happens if a person forgot to say one of these things. Number 11 is he doesn't know if he said it. He doesn't remember. Sometimes, unfortunately, we bench on or daven on autopilot. Right? So always say, Baruch Hashem, we can, but terrible if we do. Right? In other words, Baruch Hashem, we have the background and I mean the people who daven autopilots because they've been davening for many years. Can't daven on autopilot if it's very difficult. Right? When a person has been davening daily and for many years, then sometimes it can go into autopilot. So Baruch Hashem, someone's in that situation that it could, but it's unfortunate that it does. So he doesn't know. So we'll start again. 11 inside. He forgot. Okay, so if he forgot and he missed the whole thing, or he doesn't know, he can't remember. Imhu surveyor. So if he has eaten, that he's satiated. So then the az birchas mazon the raisa, which means that needs to bench and say this grace after meals as a Torah prohibition. Then sarchel barach pam shenis. He now has to do the entire benching over again for a say. And Yalav depends which meal for Shabbos was Yontif. But let's stick to Retzei for now. For Shabbos. V'chein, and likewise, he dozed off in the middle of benching. And when he wakes up, he's not quite sure where he got up to. He knows he started. He knows he said something, but he dozed off. He doesn't know where he got up to. So he has to start from the beginning. Now the isha shnismakta im biricha oloi if a lady is unaware whether, or she's not sure if she benched or not, so she doesn't have to recite it again. Okay. Now, so if we left out Retzei totally, or even we're in doubt, we're going to have to start all over again. So Yud base, we're going to talk about a person remembered in the middle. Right? They forgot, but then they realized. So the question is, where did they get up to? So it's a few steps in this. So hopefully it won't be too complicated. We'll just go step by step. Ta b'Shabbos lo he made a mistake, and on Shabbos he didn't say the additional piece of Shabbos of Retzei. Or was Yontiv, and he didn't say the additional Yontiv Prev Yalav. Now, so when did he remember? Im niska koidim shiska sashem in a bracha shel baruch Hashem b'nei barachma b'shalayim. if he remembered before he said the next bracha. So even though he started the next words, he said Uvenei Yerushalayim, but he didn't actually say God's name in the bracha. He even said Baruch Atah, just not yet Hashem's name. Then there's no problem. He just goes back. He says the Ratzei, and then he continues again, Uvenei Yerushalayim. It's no problems. Aval, however, Im loy nizke ajla achshizkas Hashem. He only remembers after he's already said Hashem's name. He said God's name already in the blessing. So to pause, to go back now would mean saying Hashem's name in the blessing for no reason. So if he already that's when he remembers. So he's got himself in a bind. So what does he do? Messiah es bracha b'nei Racham V'Shalayim Amen. He finishes off the bracha he was saying of b'nei Racham V'Shalayim Amen. V'Omer, and then he says in addition. So if it's Shabbos, so Sham at that point. So he hasn't started the next bracha yet, right? He's finished up b'nei Racham V'Shalayim Amen. This is likewise if he just remembered at that point. He says then on Shabbos. And most Sidurim will have this. A lot of the benches don't have it because the benches don't start putting, if you made this mistake and that mistake, some do. But Sidurim usually have this. He adds a new bracha. Baruch atah Hashem, bless you Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, our God, King of the universe. Shenas and Shabbos and Menucha, who gave Shabbos as we'll loosely call it a rest. La'ama Yisrael, to his people, the Jewish people, Bahava, out of love, Ula'ois, Labris, and as a sign and a covenant. Baruch atah Hashem, bless you Hashem, Mekadosh Shabbos, who sanctified Shabbos. So he adds a new bracha in its place. That's what he says on Shabbos. V'yontiv, on Misham, and if it was Yontiv, and if he got Yalav v'Yavai, and then he realized at that point, so he says different bracha. Baruch atah Hashem, bless you Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, our God, King of the universe, Asher nasa Yom Tovim la'ama Yisrael, who gave the Yom Tovim, the festival, to his people Israel, the Sosin, the Simcha, for joy and a different type of joy, and he gave us as Yom Chag Ploni Hazeh, the festival of, you fill in the blank, whichever first happens to be. Baruch atah Hashem, blessed you Hashem, B'kadesh Yisrael V'Zmanim, who sanctified the Jewish people and the various times in the calendar. That's if it's Yontif. V'imchal Rosh Chodesh b'Shabbos b'Shachar L'Tzei v'Gam Yal v'Yavai. Now let's say it was Shabbos and Yontif. So I said Rosh Chodesh mistakes. It was both. And he forgot L'Tzei and Yal v'Yavai. He just did a regular weekday benching and realized at that point before he started the new bracha. And now he says we're going to say a combination of the two. Now he says Baruch atah Hashem, bless you Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, our God, King of the universe, Shenas and Shabbos Menucha, la'ama Yisrael b'Hava, that gave us Shabbos as a Menucha, a rest, like a better translation, his people Israel out of love, la'ois labris, and as a sign and a covenant. The Yomim Tovim, and he gave us Yom Tovim, the Sosin, the Simcha, for a joy and a pleasure. As Yom Chag Ploni Hazeh gave us the festival of, whichever one happens to be. Then he says, Baruch atah Hashem, bless you Hashem, the Kaddish Shabbos, who sanctified Shabbos, the Yisrael, and the Jewish people, Vazmanim, and the times in the calendar, the Yom Tovim. Now, the Im Amar Ratzei v'lo Amar Yalav v'Yavai. And if he happened, he remembered Ratzei, but he forgot Yalav v'Yavai. He remembered the extra for Shabbos, but he forgot the extra for Yom Tov. Then he doesn't have to do the combination. He says the same thing if it was just Yom Tov, that the blessing. And the other way around, he remembered Yalav v'Yavai, he remembered it was Yom Tov, but he forgot, let's say, the additional for Shabbos. He says it like it was just Shabbos. So again, 2 steps so far. Step number 1, he remembers before he says Hashem's name in the bracha of Bnei Barachmov. So then he goes back. If he remembered after he said Hashem's name, or from any point from after he said Hashem's name until he started the next bracha number 4, then he says this additional blessing in his place. Now, Yud Gimel, 13. Now he is only remembered after he started the next bracha, the 4th bracha. Shehi, which is Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam, Hakel Avinu V'chulu. That's the blessing. Afiloloi Ama Rak Teva Baruch Bavad. He's even only said the word Baruch. Didn't say Hashem's name yet. He's just started at the first word Baruch. Shuv Einet Tekona B'Berchos Asher Nosen. He can't fix it up anymore by saying this additional extra blessing. He's lost that chance. And therefore, if it was one of the first 2 blessings, the meals, so the nighttime blessing, nighttime meal, or the lunch, the daytime meal, main daytime meal, one of the first 2 meals, he has to go back to the beginning of benching and he has to start all over again. Shloi Amr Dain Rak Baruch Atah Hashem. And if he's only said Baruch Atah Hashem, Yisayim Lamdeni Chokecha, he finishes off the word Zamdeni Chokecha, which is a pasuk. Kadei Shlo Tiyeh Levatala, in order that he just say Hashem's name for nothing. V'achar kach, and afterwards Chayz the Rosh Birchas Mazon, he goes back to the beginning of benching. So that's the first 2 meals, because the first 2 meals are Shabbos. A person has to wash. Aval b'suda shlishis, but if it's a 3rd Shabbos meal, shafil b'Shabbos, even on Shabbos, ein mechuyev lechol pas tavka. Now you have to have a 3rd meal, and ideally you should wash and have bread, but you're not obligated to have the bread. So therefore, then you don't have to repeat the whole benching. Chosh can be Yontiv, and how much more so on Yontiv, where you don't have to have 3 meals. Birchas Hamazon Ein Chayvus Hayom Alav, that Yontiv, the daytime, so seemingly also lunch, is not obligation to bread. Therefore, Ein Chayvus the Rosh, you have to go back to the beginning. The Goyim Kach Birchas Hamazon. You just finish the benching wherever you're up to. Amniska Makim Shachal Sakin Birchas Shanasim B'Chulu. But if you remembered in a place where you can fix it up by saying that additional blessing that we quoted before, then even if you had 50 meals that day, each meal you should try and fix it up. So all of that was Shabbos and Yom Tov. We didn't mention Rosh Chodesh yet. So Rosh Chodesh we're going to see is a little more lenient, because Rosh Chodesh should not necessarily have an obligation to have a meal. So let's look at number 14. Number 14. Ta b'Rosh Chodesh v'lo amar yal v'yavai. He erred. He made a mistake, and he didn't say yal v'yavai on Rosh Chodesh. So that's someone in. Just because we had a few people join us. I was saying last one. So chapter 44, number 14. So he didn't say Yal V'Yavai, the additional prayer in the benching for Rosh Chodesh. So Ayma says, so the same thing. He's leaving out the first 2 steps. But the first step is, if we remember before we say Hashem's name in the next bracha, we just go back. If we've already said Hashem's name in the next bracha, or even if we finish the next bracha, so the bracha b'nei barachma, but we didn't start the 4th bracha, then oima we say Baruch Atah Hashem, bless you Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam, our God, King of the universe, shenasan Rosh Chodoshim la'ama Yisrael, that he gave Rosh Chodesh to his people, the Jewish people, the Zikaron is remembrance. but then it ends there. We don't finish it off, Baruch Atah Hashem, like we did the last ones. So that is Rosh Chodesh. So now we mentioned Yontiv, Yalav Yavoy on Yontiv, and Yalav Yavoy on Rosh Chodesh. The Chol Hamoed. So now we're gonna somewhere in between. It's an intermediate day of a festival. The intermediate day of the festival. So it's not the actual festival itself. So we know on Pesach and Sukkot we have Yontiv either side, and in the middle is intermediate days. Chol Hamoed. Imlay Ama Yalav Yavoy. If you didn't say Yalav Yavoy, so Yoma we still add at that point, Baruch Atah Hashem, bless you Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, our God, King of the universe, Asher nasan moedim l'amo Yisrael, and that gave festivals to the Jewish people, the sos and the simcha for a joy and a pleasure. Es Yom Chag Ploini v'zeh, the festival of, we add in whichever one happens to be, let's say Chag Pesach, Baruch Atah Hashem, bless you Hashem, Mekadesh Yisrael Bazman. But if we forget, we're not going to have to, if we forgot it totally, we're not going to have to repeat it. But Rosh Hashanah Omer. Now in Rosh Hashanah we say, just have a siddur. So those have the the new annotated Tilas Hashem siddur. Just all these blessings, if we forget. So the benching itself, starts on page 88. And on page 92 has the Rasen, the Yalav Yavoy. And then on 93, there's a gray shaded box. If you only remember at this point, right? It's got all these blessings that we add. And I know an art scroll siddur, those who use an art scroll, it's in there as well. As I said, most benches don't have it included, but all the siddurim they do. So let's say it's Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah, the addition. So if a person forgot to say Yalav Yavoy, and he only remembers at this point, the extra blessing is a little bit different. Baruch Atah Hashem, bless you Hashem, Elokeinu our God, Melech haolam, King of the universe, Shenosan Yom Tovim L'Amo Yisrael, that he gave Yom Tovs to his people, the Jewish people, Es Yom HaZikaron Hazeh, this day of remembrance. Baruch Atah Hashem, bless you Hashem, Mekadesh Yisrael v'Yom HaZikaron, who sanctified the Jewish people, and the day of remembrance, day of Rosh Hashanah. Now, if on Yontiv a person only remembered after they started the fourth bracha, so they didn't even add this extra thing. You don't have to go back. Why? Mishum the Rosh Chodesh, the Rosh Hashanah, on Rosh Chodesh and Chol Hamoed and Rosh Hashanah, a person is not obligated to have a meal based on bread, specifically. It's good to do so, but a person's not obligated. So since they're not obligated to have the meal due to the Yontiv, if they forgot to mention the Yontiv after the fact, it works. Okay. Tes Vav, number 15. Rosh Chodesh Shechal v'Shabbos. Right, so we had before Shabbos and Yontiv, so you have to say Ritzei for Shabbos and Yalav Yava for the Yontiv. Now we've got similar but slightly different with Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh. So we have the Ritzei for Shabbos, the same thing, but Yalav Yava for Rosh Chodesh, which we mentioned is a side different obligation, because on Rosh Chodesh you don't particularly have to have a meal based on bread. So 15, Rosh Chodesh Chal b'Shabbos. Yeah, Rosh Chodesh falls out on Shabbos. B'Shachach Ritzei v'gam Yalav Yavoy. And he forgot to say all the additions. Forgot to say Ritzei for Shabbos. Forgot to say Yalav Yavoy for Rosh Chodesh. V'nizka v'omer, so again, first step we're leaving out. But if he remembered before he said the Baruch Atah Hashem he said Hashem's name, before he said Hashem's name, and the blessing of B'nai Barachimov, he just goes back and he says it, no problem. Once he says Hashem's name, until that point, until he says starts the fourth blessing, he can do an addition. So since he forgot both, so he's going to put them both into the same addition. He's not going to make two additions. He makes one combined addition. What's the combined addition? Baruch atah Hashem, bless you Hashem Elokeinu, our God, Melech HaOlam, King of the universe, Shenoson, that he gave us. And what do? Koil gam Rosh Chodesh, beim Sicha, beim B'Chasim. So we say the same blessing. We include Rosh Chodesh in the beginning and the end. But so what's he actually saying? Shenoson Shabbos Menucha. He gave us Shabbos as a rest, the Amma Yisrael, to his Jewish people, B'Hava and love, L'Ois L'Bris, and as a sign and a covenant. V'Roshei Chodoshim Zikaron, as also Rosh Chodesh is remembrance. Baruch atah Hashem, blessed you Hashem, Mekadesh Yisrael HaShabbos, who sanctifies Shabbos, Yisrael, the Jewish people, Roshei Chodoshim, and the Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of the Jewish months. Now, even though if it was only Rosh Chodesh and not also Shabbos, it was only Rosh Chodesh, we wouldn't have a Baruch atah Hashem at the end. In this situation, since we're having an extra Baruch atah Hashem at the end due to the fact that the Shabbos, Mazki Gam Rosh Chodesh, we also mention Rosh Chodesh in it as well. And if the person remembered to say Ritzei for the Shabbos, and he just forgot to say Yalav Yavoy, Rosh Chodesh, and he didn't realize until he started the fourth bracha benching, he doesn't have to repeat. Because, as we mentioned before, a person is not obligated to have a meal based on bread and Rosh Chodesh. And because he said the addition for Shabbos, which was eating bread on the Shabbos meal was obligatory. The Rosh Chodesh and Chayzer, and just Rosh Chodesh itself, that doesn't cause him to go back. Now, the other way around, if he said Yalav Yava, you remember Rosh Chodesh, but he forgot to say Ratzei for Shabbos, now he's going to have to go back to the beginning of benching. So Gam Yalav Yava, and he'll have to repeat Yalav Yava again since he's doing the whole benching from the beginning. Rosh Hashanah, and the same thing applies to Chol Hamoed and Rosh Hashanah. Okay, 16. So Chanukah or Purim. Chanukah and Purim, we have a different addition. We have the addition of Al Hanissim. And it goes in a different place. It's in the middle of the second blessing. Second blessing is the blessing of thanking Hashem and recognizing Hashem's greatness. So that's where thanking for the miracles of Purim and Chanukah belong. So in the middle over there, we say Al Nissim. So Chanukah Purim, Im Shach Loimer Al Nissim. If a person forgot, say it. V'loi niska ad la'acha Amas Hashem Meschimis Abraham. And he didn't remember until he says Hashem's name at the conclusion of the blessing. So any time before the conclusion of the blessing, any time he gets to Hashem, and before he gets to Hashem's name at the conclusion of the blessing, he just goes back and he repeats whatever bit he did say. But once he says Hashem's name at the conclusion of the blessing, so Sha'ama, he said, Baruch atah Hashem, we don't go back. You just finish the blessing. But you have a second chance. What's the second chance? So towards the end of benching, those who are familiar with it, there's a place on special occasions we say special Rachman. This one for Shabbos, this one for Rosh Chodesh, this one for Yom Tov. At that point, he says Harachman Yasser Lano Nisim Niflois. Says Harachman, the all merciful one, who performs for us miracles and wonders, just like he did for our ancestors in those days. Bisman Hazeh should be done in these days. And then he continues, when it's Hanukkah, it says in the times of Metisiyo, etc., or B'mei Mordechai v'chulu on Purim, he says in the times of Mordechai, etc., and then he goes from there. Okay. So that was all if we forgot something. Now, 17 is going to be a slightly different case. We didn't forget. What
Quick
happened
question,
though? Yeah.
if I could. After Alanisa, you have Yalla Kol Hashem Elokeinu Anachnu Moedim Lach.
Yep.
So you got a few words until you say Hashem Elokeinu. Well, that we don't care about. That's saying Hashem doesn't make a difference. It's only when you're in
Well,
the middle of saying
once
Baruch
it doesn't make a
Atah
difference.
Hashem.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, sorry, I interrupt you. Keep going with the question.
No, I'm just saying.
Yeah. So it's
Here, if
obviously
it doesn't start with Baruch Atah, we
yeah.
don't care.
It's problematic to say Hashem's name for no reason, regardless. So it's not ideal, but it doesn't have the same force as actual bracha. Baruch atah Hashem. So even though you're correct, let's say he would have said that whole first sentence, but he remembered before he said Hashem's name in the
Included the
concluding
bracha.
blessing. He's going to go back and he'll say those words again, which is not ideal because it means the first time round, he said Hashem's name for no reason. But we'll still go back. What stops us from going back is when we say Hashem's name at the conclusion of the blessing. That's like we've hammered a nail in it. It's not just we close the door, we've turned the key. Yeah. Okay. So 17, we're gonna have the following situation. Shabbos, the third meal. It doesn't have to be a third meal, but it's probably the most practical. Let's say he washes for the third Shabbos meal an hour before Shabbos ends. And here was a whole group of people, and they could even be by himself, but here we have a whole group of people, and they were singing the Zemiras, the special Shabbos songs of praise. They were sharing words of Torah. And now it's time to bench. And Shabbos has technically been out for 15 minutes already. And 15, I just made that up. It could be 1 second. It doesn't matter. But Shabbos is over. So on the one hand, he ate the meal or the bulk of the meal, or doesn't even have to be the bulk. He ate a significant amount of the meal while it was still Shabbos. So l'chayra, seemingly, he needs to say the addition for Shabbos. But Shabbos is finished. So does he still need to say it? We're gonna see. This is the issue we're addressing. Eichel b'Shabbos, he was eating on Shabbos, v'chashka loy, and it got dark. Kevin Shadain Holis Paul Arvis, since he did not yet pray the evening service, so he did not formally bring in the new day, the Motzei Shabbos, the Saturday night. Omer Ratzei, he still says Ratzei. V'chein b'Yontav, Rosh Chodesh, v'Chanukah, Purim. The same thing is not only Shabbos, even if it was Yontav, he started a meal and Yontav finished. Or Rosh Chodesh, he had a Rosh Chodesh meal and Rosh Chodesh finished. Or it was Chanukah or Purim, and while he was having the meal, Chanukah Purim finished. So he's going to say the Allah Nisim. Kevin Sheschalas Hasuda Hais B'Yom, since the beginning of the Suda, of this meal, was during the daytime when it was still Shabbos or Rosh Chodesh or Yontav or Purim or Chanukah or a combination. Sarech lahazkir me'inyan hayom. He has to mention the special quality of that day. Even though he's benching after dark, and of course the Jewish day starts at night time, so it's technically the next day in the Jewish calendar. Okay, so he has to do that. Now we're going to do the reverse. Let's say he started to eat on a regular Tuesday. It's not Shabbos, it's not Rosh Chodesh, it's not Yom Tov. It's a regular Tuesday. And it doesn't have to be Tuesday. I just made that up as an example. And his meal continued into the night. And that night began Rosh Chodesh. So it's the reverse of the case. So what happens now? Vim achol be'erev Rosh Chodesh. If a person started to eat his meal the day before Rosh Chodesh, and his meal continued into the night. And he ate a kazayas, the olive-size piece of bread, after dark. So he's eaten what's considered a significant amount, halachically significant amount after dark. So he also says Yalav Yom Rosh Chodesh, even though the meal started before Rosh Chodesh. And that doesn't only apply Rosh Chodesh, but the same thing, but Chanukah, Purim. He started the meal before Chanukah, and by the time he benches, it's Chanukah started already. And he ate a kazayas of bread after Chanukah started. So then he says that. So why do we mention these cases and not Shabbos? Because we're going to see Shabbos slightly different. Vim hiskol echol b'Shabbos nishkam sedasa b'toich halayla. If he started to began eating a meal on Shabbos, and it went into Saturday night for achol gam b'layla b'tzayis pas, and he ate after Shabbos a kazayas, this olive-sized, this significant portion of bread, l'machal Rosh Chodesh, and the next day was Rosh Chodesh, so Saturday night, Sunday was Rosh Chodesh. And now he says, Ritzei v'gam yalav v'yavoi. He says Ritzei for Shabbos, because he started the meal on Shabbos, and he says yalav v'yavoi for Saturday night. Now, even though, for Rosh Chodesh, even though seemingly the contradictory, because one is a benching for Saturday, one's a benching for Sunday. Nevertheless, since his su'udah extended into both, and he ate the minimum of food of halachic significance on both, so he says both in the same benching. V'gam b'Chanukah b'Purim, the same thing if Purim and Chanukah was the day afterwards. Now, that's the first opinion, he says. V'yesh cholkim, there are those who disagree with this. Why? Because they're contradictory. Either you're benching for Saturday or you're benching on Sunday. Can't bench both. I mean, what's going on? Al kain, therefore, to avoid the issue, person should make sure they don't extend the meal into the night. So practically speaking, if we bench, we say both. That's what we do. But the author, the Kitzur from Shlomo Ganzfried, Olav Shalom, is advising to avoid the issue if possible. Yud Ches, number 18. All right. Now, Im Yesh Nochri Babayishim Varach B'Gsamozin. There's a non-Jew present while you're benching. So there's a point at the benching where we say Yavarach Hasanu Kolon Yechad. We all bless together, everyone together, all of us. We all do bench together. That's what we say. But if we have the non-Jew there, the non-Jew, even if he chooses to bench and thank Hashem, but he doesn't have the obligation. So we can't say all of us do this together because he doesn't have to do it together. So we add in two words. Yom we say, Oisano, we, the members, B'nai Bris Kolonok Yachad, members of the covenant, say together. All of us, we, the members of the covenant, that was the Jewish people. So we add that in. Okay. Any questions on that before we go to the next chapter? It's a little complicated, but the bottom line is follow the instructions in the sinner. And if you realize you forgot, quickly look in the next set of instructions in the gray boxes, and hopefully that will help. Okay, chapter 45. So we're going to see that when we have a group of people benching together, there's a formal invitation, and the invitation changes slightly. The minimum is if you have three people, and then if we have a 10 and possibly larger groups. So exactly how do we do this invitation? So Siman Mem Hey, chapter 45, Hilchus Birchus Zimun V'Amozin, the laws about the invitation and some laws of benching in general. So Aleph, number 1. Shloisha she'achlu b'yachad. 3. Now we're talking about 3 men, right? Again, this is a Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, is a bridge color Jewish law, so we don't get into too many details. But we say in theory, in concept, since women are obligated to bench, if you had 3 and there was a mixture of men and women, different things, we could have this formal invitation. But practically we don't, because we don't want to encourage men and women to have meals together. Now, obviously, if it's a family, they meal together. But if you do it out somewhere, so men can join the meal together, and they could say a mezuman, an invitation together. But if it's out, we minimize the interactions between men and women. And once we don't have it for strangers, we don't have it for the family, because it's we don't have sometimes women yes, sometimes women no. We have blanket rule. So 3 men, they ate together. They have to, when they bench, they have to have a zimun, this formal invitation. And ideally, in other words, the mitzvah, in other words, it's not part of the obligation, but it's the best way to do the obligation is to bench over a cup, to make a cup of blessing. Vim efshon, if possible. Sorry, and if possible. Tzarichem lahadash yekos yayin. It should be a cup of wine. Vim shaba yayin, and if it's impossible to have wine, there's no wine. Yesheicha could use beer or yain devash, med, right? Use mead or yain saraf, or whiskey, some hard liquor. Shechama medina, that's the drink of the land. Right, it's a drink of the land. There is a view that Coca-Cola could be the drink of the land in America. It's not alcoholic, so it's a question whether this works. But
make a
ideally
version that puts alcohol in.
Yeah, rum and coke, huh? Something like that. So, but if there's another drink, the drink of the land, certainly beer is the drink of the land in Australia. Say to a large extent in America also. The haino she'en yain godel sham kederach yoy min. Now, when we say that there's not other drink, this is where grapevines don't grow within a day's distance from the city. Valkain, and therefore wine is expensive. And therefore people are used to drinking these other beverages instead of wine. And there is a view that even individual benches on his own, he still requires to bench over a cup of wine. Generally we don't do that. It says in the Hagim, Madaktim, Shavarchim, B'Yachid, it says it's a custom those who are very meticulous that when they bench on their own, they actually hold the cup. They just leave on the table in front of them. I think practically nowadays people don't, individuals don't bench over a cup. Really you should if it's even 3, but for some reason most people don't. But we're going to see there's a different type of invitation when you have 10. Generally, we see that people do. Right, so this kaishel bracha, right, with the drink of the land, cham medina, that we need for these things, as we said, ideally should be alcoholic. But we have Chuvas and Reb Moshe Feinstein, for example, they say for Havdalah, where even in the first instance you can use the drink of the land. Maybe in America you can use Coke, you can use coffee if there's nothing else available, or if alcohol is not good for the person. So just something interesting. Okay. So base, how do you do it? First, we fill up the cup and then we wash the hands. Now, okay, we're not talking about washing the hands before the meal, we're talking about washing hands after the meal, the Mayim Achronim. We mentioned at the beginning of the last chapter. Okay, Gimel, number 3. Yain Shasa Memeno. Now, if you drink some of the wine, Kalnisha Bakli Nase Pogum Apostlebirkas Mozen Ashis Kinum. So if you have a cup of wine, so let's say for an example, let's just use a practical example. It's a Shabbos meal, and you made kiddush on the cup, and you drank from it, or you just had some wine during the meal. You weren't the one who made kiddush; you had some wine during the meal, and you drank, and there's some wine left in the cup. Let's say quarter of the cup is filled with wine. So you can't just fill up that cup to bench, because that wine is considered blemished and disqualified for a koshel bracha, a cup that the blessing is made, that is made on either the benching or the kiddush or whatever, because it's used. It's not fresh, so to speak. So you have to fix it somehow. How do you fix it? So there's a few ways. Dahainu, how do you fix it? You put in some other wine or water that's not blemished. Now, since the cup has to be filled for the sake of a bracha, and therefore this cup was blemished, and you rectify it. So what do? So so if he's going to fill it up, it's no good. But if you pour it back into the bottle, and you've added to everything's in the bottle, and then you pour that back into the cup, then that's good. Right? Or you can pour out what's there, drink what's there, pour out what's there, and rinse out the cup and put, refill it from scratch. Okay, Dalit. Number 4. They're just like for Kiddush. And we learned about this, those who learned the laws of Shabbos with us. The cup that you say the blessing over has to be complete, has to be a whole cup. Even if the base at the bottom is broken, possible, it's no good. You can't use that cup to bench over. Even it's got a niche in the rim of the cup or a crack, possible, it's no good. It also requires to be rinsed on the inside and washed on the outside. Or at least wiped clean. And you have to pour from the bottle into the cup for the sake of the bracha. And it has to be full. And the person who makes a blessing, when they give him the cup, he should take it in 2 hands. And it says in the brackets to show how precious it is. Because the Siva says, lift your hands, holiness, and bless Hashem. and then he takes away his left hand, and he keeps it just in his right hand, levad alone. Blisio hamasmalas, that any assistance from his left hand, right? Because you don't want to make it look like a burden either. That you need to have two hands. Nice in boy, and you should look at it. In order that you shouldn't take your mind off it. You should have it at least a tefach. It's a fist off the table. There's an opinion 3 fists, but at least one. The Sivit says, "Kois Yeshua Saso Shem Hashem Ekro." It says the cup of salvation, deliverance, I'll raise up in the name of Hashem. So we said you hold it in your right hand, the itayad, but a left-handed person, he holds it in his strong hand, right, which is his left hand. Shusmo shall call Adam, which this is the left hand of everyone else. And it's appropriate to take any empty vessels off the table before you bench. Right, so the table should look neat, should be nice. Okay, so who should lead?
We don't clean up before we bench? Or we do clean up before we bench?
Well, he said you should remove the empty dishes.
We
Empty
should.
vessels. Well, I don't know if that's a full cleanup. That just means it shouldn't look like yeah. So number 5. So let's say there's we'll just keep it simple, 3 people. All 3 are the same stature. Similar age, similar Torah knowledge, similar background, the same stature. But one of them is a coin. So then mitzvah l'chavda b'chazamazon. It's nice, it's appropriate, not an obligation, it's appropriate to honor the coin with leading the invitation to the benching. Shnema says, "V'kidashtoi," and you should sanctify him. That's what it says about the Kohanim. However, im yesh b'neim adam gadol v'chashuv, if there's a great and a Torah scholar, right, in the group, someone is a once, Yavarchu, he should lead the blessing. For Nahagin l'seis la'avel lavarich, and there's also a custom that a mourner leads. Now, v'dav kashavim ma'ila. This is specifically though when they're of the same status, right? Not if you have a great Torah scholar, he's going to take priority. And another aspect is that we say it's proper to honor a person to lead the benching, someone who's generous. And he hates dishonest money. And he does kindness with his money. Right? Shnei Marza says, the literally the good-eyed one, but I would say the generous person. Generous person should bless. Al tikre yavarach ela yavarich. So it literally means the generous person is blessed, but we could theoretically read it as the generous one should bless. That's good to have, our blessings come into our financial blessings come into the world via the benching. So it's good to have someone who's generous to bring these blessings down. Yeah, David.
Here the translation says a gracious person.
Okay.
So you can have somebody who's poor and gracious, whereas a person
someone who's poor and generous also. I mean,
a person who's generous is usually a person who has lots of money. So this way,
could be. I knew this family in Melbourne when I was in high school that someone's fridge broke down. So they gave them their fridge, and they didn't have a fridge for a month. Maybe they were too generous. I don't know. But But Ayin type means he's got like a positive outlook, and so he wants to give these blessings to others. He wants goodness for others. So it's probably a combination of the English words gracious and generous, and a lot of words in English and Hebrew don't match up exactly. But he's got this. So it literally means a good eye. Doesn't mean he has 20/20 vision. It means he looks at. Although that's also helpful. Not that I would know about that for many years, but it's so it is. And same with someone stingy and whatever. It's called ayin ra, right? He has a bad eye, negative eye. Okay. Vav number 6. Hamavarich Yom Techila. So the person who leads the benching, he's doing invitation. What does he say first? Avlon unavorich. Let us come and bless. Okay, that's Aramaic. Kol milei kedusha bayazmana, because all matters of kedusha, of holiness, require an invitation. And he puts in brackets, so Yoma Beloshen Ashkenaz, or I should say in Yiddish, Rabbi Sai Mivel benchen. Gentlemen, let us bench. Right? And of course, then there's some people just say it in Hebrew, Rabbi Navarich, which means, gentlemen, let us bench. Msubim oinim, and the people gathered around answer, Yehi Shem Hashem Mavarach Mi'ato V'Yadulam. Right? Which means, let the name of Hashem be blessed from now forever. So that's round 1. He gives the invitation, everyone responds. Now, then comes round 2. And then the one leading the benching says, Brashus v'chul, Navarech shechano v'chul. He says, right, Bashus Moran v'Rabbanon v'Rabbaisai, he says, right, with the permission of all the distinguished gentlemen, he says, Navarech shechano v'shaloi, let us bless him from whose we have eaten. Masubim Aimrim, and then all the people gather around respond to that. Baruch Shechanu v'chulu. They say, Baruch Shechanu Mishlov Tovachinu, right? That blessed is he of whose we have eaten and whose goodness we live. The Chai is a Mavarich, and then some people, that's the end of the Mazumin, and they just start the benching. But then there are those who have around 3, that the person leading of the benching, then he's sorry. Everyone now says, the leader of the benching says, Baruch Shechanu v'chul, he repeats after them that. V'nahagin b'ksas m'koimish l'ach Hashem mavarach of tovachayinu, oimim ha'subim amei. Some people, it's a small amount of people, have the custom that after the whole invitation, all the gathered people say amei. B'ksas m'koimish lo yinagalom amei. In some places, they don't say amei. And then there's different customs. Some people say Baruch Hu Shemoy at various points. And then some of the custom, the leader says that even when there's 3, he still says they say the Baruch Shemoy. While other people only say Baruch Hu Shemoy if there's 10 when we say Hashem's name, we say Elokeinu. Az Yomru, then they say it. V'chein yesh linhoig, and he says he says this is the proper opinion, right? Chabad, for example, I don't think they ever say Baruch Shemoy in the invitation, but some do. And he said that the other people, not the leader, they don't say it. And certainly someone who benches without a mizum and without an invitation doesn't add in these things. Let's squeeze in one more. Zayin. Now the leader should try and lead. In other words, the bench in a louder voice. Now, the origin of what we're saying now is they didn't really have printed. There wasn't printing in times past, so they certainly didn't have benches, and there quite often were not enough sidurim to go around. So the leader didn't just invite everyone. The leader actually led everyone in benching. So the leader would say each word aloud, and the other people repeat after him quietly each word, and he helped them bench because they didn't have printed text to bench from. Everyone had to know it off by heart. Today, that's not really the case. So first we'll say what it says here, and then we'll say what we do after Mavarach. The one leading the benching should bench aloud. And all the other people should say it together with him quietly, word for word. And but before the conclusion of each blessing, they should quickly finish before him. They should honor amen in order they can say amen to his bracha. So nowadays, everyone's able to bench themselves, and having someone bench in a loud voice can actually be disruptive. Disturbs, not only doesn't help like it did then, but it actually disturbs. So generally what happens is in many places, the person leading still says the first bracha aloud, but not everywhere. But he says the last few words of each blessing aloud, and so people can answer amen to each blessing, and people bench at their own pace and their own thing. Yeah, David.
You were saying before about Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo.
Yeah.
So when I first became religious back in the 70s, so I asked one of the rabbis, I said, my grandmother says something before she lights candles. And it's hard to tell what she's saying, but it sounds like Berechi Bereshmai, Berechi Bereshmai, Berechi Bereshmai. So he said to me, she's saying Baruch Hu, Baruch Shemo. I was like, I was shocked. So he said, you should ask her because it sounds like a Satmar accent. So the next time I went home from the yeshiva in New York, went back to Philadelphia, I said to my grandmother, where's your family from? She's this little town in Hungary you never heard from. It's called Satmar.
There we go. My father told me when he was a little boy, so he was in England when he was a little boy. So with the accent, he used to think they were saying Yorkshire Eskimo.
That's funny.
Right, until it was about 7, he said he used to say Yorkshire Eskimo. And then he realized what the words actually were.
When I first came to 70, they were singing this song, and I thought to myself, gee, I like ice cream as much as the next guy, but they're singing Am Galida, Am Galida, Am Galida.
That's it.
Of ice cream, I think. What's going on here? Because they're saying Ad Belidai.
That's it. I was since we're mentioning that song, we were one time when I was in yeshiva, I was eating at a friend's house, and his grandmother came and she brought a friend. They were traveling together, and then they was also there at the meal, and the friend asked us to sing the Ugly Guy song. No one's for the life we couldn't work out what the Ugly Guy song was. We thought, then we realized there was that song Ad Die. She thought the words were Ugly Guy. That was the friend. That's anyway.
I had, then there's a teacher in school who had his uncle Oliver Shalom.
That's a very unfortunate name, isn't it?
What song was that?
His uncle Oliver Shalom.
Yeah. All right. So I wish everyone a wonderful week.
Thank you. Wonderful week to you.
I guess we'll say good Shabbos because we won't see you till next Sunday. But Enjoy. Take care.
Be
Thank
well.
you,
Be
Rabbi.
Thank you. Be
Pleasure.
good,
Thank you.
everybody.